Have you ever noticed how some people seem to win not by working harder, not by being smarter in the obvious sense, but by making one quiet move at exactly the right moment, and suddenly the entire game tilts in their favor while everyone else is left confused, reacting too late, wondering what just happened? Because the truth is, most people are not losing because they lack intelligence. They are losing because they are playing the wrong game entirely. They are reacting when they should be positioning. They are speaking when they should be silent. They are chasing outcomes when they should be controlling incentives. And worst of all, they believe the game is about what is visible, when in reality, the real game, the one that decides everything, happens beneath the surface, in the realm of expectations, perception, and calculated restraint. This is where the simple move begins, not with action but with awareness. Not with force but with control. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something that most people are too emotionally entangled to see. Humans are predictable not because they are simple but because they are governed by patterns they cannot escape. Fear, desire, ego, validation, insecurity, these are not weaknesses. They are levers. And those who learn to see them clearly begin to understand that power is not about domination. It is about alignment. You don't force outcomes, you design them. And here is the uncomfortable reality: 99% of people walk into every interaction already defeated, not because someone overpowered them, but because they revealed their intentions too early. They showed their need. They exposed their desire for approval, for agreement, for validation. And in doing so, they surrendered the only thing that truly matters in any strategic interaction: leverage. Leverage is not loud, it does not announce itself, it does not demand attention, it waits, it observes. It calculates, and when it moves once precisely and irreversibly. The move itself is almost invisible. So simple that most people overlook it completely, and yet it dismantles entire dynamics, shifts power structures, and leaves others unknowingly playing into your design. It is the move of controlled unpredictability. Understand this carefully. Humans crave patterns. They need consistency to feel safe. When someone behaves in a predictable way, we begin to map them, to understand them, to anticipate them. And the moment we can anticipate someone, we can control how we respond to them. We feel secure. But what happens when that predictability disappears? What happens when someone does not react the way they are supposed to? What happens when the expected move never comes? This is where the game changes, because now, instead of you trying to understand them, they are trying to understand you. Instead of you chasing clarity, they are trapped in uncertainty, and uncertainty is not just uncomfortable, it is destabilizing. It creates tension, it creates obsession, it pulls attention toward you without effort. This is the move. You break the pattern, but not randomly, never randomly. That is chaos, not strategy. The key is controlled disruption. You establish a pattern first, you allow people to believe they understand you, you let them grow comfortable, predictable, confident in their assumptions, and then, at the exact moment they think they have you figured out, you change. Not drastically, not emotionally, just enough to create doubt, because doubt is where power begins. Machiavelli knew that people do not fear what they understand, they fear what they cannot predict, and once fear enters the equation, behavior shifts. People hesitate, they reconsider, they second, guess themselves, and in that hesitation you gain time. Space, control. Think about how most people operate. They respond immediately, they react emotionally. They reveal exactly where they stand, exactly what they want, exactly how they feel. And in doing so, they make themselves completely transparent. Transparency is vulnerability disguised as honesty. But the strategist, the one who understands the deeper layer of the game, does something different. They pause, and that silence begins to rewrite the entire interaction, because now the other person is left filling in the gaps. They start asking questions internally. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Are they losing interest? Did I miscalculate? And just like that, the control shifts. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. Silence, when used correctly, is not absence. It is pressure, and pressure forces people to reveal themselves. This is where the second layer of the move unfolds. Once you break the pattern, once you introduce uncertainty, you do not rush to resolve it. You let it breathe, you allow the tension to grow, because humans cannot tolerate unresolved tension. They will act to relieve it, and when they act, they expose their priorities, their fears, their weaknesses. They will over-explain, overcommit, overextend, and all you have to do is watch. Most people believe power comes from speaking, from asserting, from proving. But Machiavelli understood something far colder. Power comes from making others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. Because the less they know about you, the more they project onto you. And projection is the most powerful manipulation of all. They will see what they want to see, they will believe what they fear to be true, they will create narratives in their own mind, and then react to those narratives as if they are real. You don't need to convince them, you just need to let them convince themselves. This is why the move works on almost everyone. Because almost everyone is driven by the need for certainty. They want to know where they stand, they want clarity. They want reassurance, and when you deny them that, when you remove the predictable response, you create a vacuum. And humans cannot tolerate vacuums, they fill them with emotion, with assumption, with reaction, and every reaction they make gives you more information, more leverage, more control. But here is where most people fail when they try to imitate this strategy. They confuse unpredictability with inconsistency. They believe the goal is to be erratic, to behave in ways that are confusing for the sake of confusion. That is not power, that is instability, and instability repels. True unpredictability is calculated. It is intentional, it is precise. You are not changing randomly, you are changing when it benefits you. You are breaking the pattern only when the pattern has served its purpose, because patterns are not weaknesses. They are tools. You create them so you can break them. You build expectations so you can violate them at the moment that gives you maximum advantage. This is the move that outsmarts 99% of people, because 99% of people never think beyond the immediate interaction. They are focused on what is happening now, what they feel now, what they want now, but the strategist thinks in layers. They are not reacting to the moment, they are shaping the next one. Every action is a setup, every silence is a signal. Every deviation is a calculated disruption, and over time this creates something incredibly powerful. Reputation, not the kind built on words or appearances, but the kind built on perception. People begin to see you as unpredictable, not in a chaotic sense, but in a controlled, deliberate way. They realize they cannot easily read you, cannot easily anticipate you, and that realization changes how they interact with you. They become cautious, respectful, even slightly intimidated, not because you demanded it, but because you engineered it. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But what he truly understood was deeper than that. It is not fear itself that grants power, it is uncertainty. Because uncertainty contains fear without requiring confrontation. It creates distance without requiring rejection. It commands attention without demanding it. And in a world where everyone is constantly trying to be understood, to be accepted, to be validated, the one who remains slightly out of reach, the one who cannot be fully decoded, becomes the one everyone else orbits around. This is not about manipulation in the crude sense. It is about understanding the structure of human behavior. It is about seeing the invisible patterns that govern interaction, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. You begin to notice how predictable people are, how they follow scripts they are not even aware of, how they react based on expectation rather than intention, and you realize something that changes everything. The game was never about competing, it was about positioning, because when you position yourself correctly, you don't need to fight for power. It comes to you, quietly, naturally, inevitably, and the most dangerous part. Most people will never realize what you are doing. They will simply feel it. They will feel the shift, the imbalance, the subtle sense that they are no longer in control, even if they cannot explain why. And by the time they start to question it, the game is already over. The moment that silence stretches just a second longer than expected, something almost invisible begins to fracture inside the other person's mind. It is subtle at first, like a hairline crack in glass, but it spreads quickly, distorting everything they thought they understood about the interaction. Because now they are no longer responding to you, they are responding to their own uncertainty. And this is where the deeper layer of the game unfolds, the layer that most people never reach because they are too busy trying to control outcomes instead of controlling perceptions. You see, the average person believes influence comes from persuasion. They think if they say the right words, show the right logic, or express the right emotion, they can shape the result in their favor. But that belief is exactly what traps them, because persuasion is reactive. It requires engagement. It exposes intention, and intention, once exposed, can be resisted. Machiavelli understood something far more dangerous. The strongest position is not to convince, but to let others arrive at the conclusion you want without realizing they were guided there. And that begins with tension. Tension is the hidden currency of every interaction. It exists in every pause, every delay, every unanswered question, every deviation from expectation. And while most people rush to eliminate tension as quickly as possible, filling silence, explaining themselves, reassuring others, the strategist does the opposite. They cultivate it, they stretch it, they let it breathe just long enough to become uncomfortable but not long enough to break the interaction entirely. Because tension does something extraordinary to the human mind. It forces attention, it pulls focus inward. It amplifies every small detail, and most importantly, it triggers the need for resolution. Humans are not designed to sit with unresolved tension. It creates cognitive pressure, a kind of mental itch that demands to be scratched. And when that pressure builds, people begin to act, not strategically, not thoughtfully, but impulsively. They seek relief, and in seeking relief they give away control. This is the second movement of the game. You have already broken the pattern. You have already introduced uncertainty. Now you allow tension to do the work for you. Watch closely what happens next. The other person begins to lean in, not physically but psychologically. Their messages become slightly longer. Their tone shifts, sometimes more cautious, sometimes more eager. They might try to clarify something that did not need clarification. They might ask questions they would not normally ask. They might reveal small pieces of themselves in an attempt to stabilize the interaction, and each of these behaviors is not random. It is data. It tells you what they value. It tells you what they fear. It tells you where their emotional investment lies. And once you understand those three things, you understand them. This is why the move is so powerful, because it turns every interaction into a one-sided extraction of information. While they are trying to figure you out, you are mapping them completely. But here is where it becomes darker, more precise, more Machiavellian in its nature. Once you have identified their patterns, their triggers, their needs, you begin to mirror just enough to create alignment. Not fully, never fully, because full alignment creates comfort and comfort dissolves tension. Instead, you create partial alignment. You give them glimpses of familiarity, small signals that suggest you understand them, that you are on the same wavelength. And just as they begin to feel that connection forming, you pull back slightly again, not enough to break it, just enough to destabilize it. This push and pull creates something incredibly addictive, because now they are not just interacting with you, they are chasing the feeling of alignment they briefly experienced. And chasing is a form of surrender. Think about it. The moment someone begins to chase, whether it is attention, validation, clarity, or approval, they have already placed themselves in a lower position. Not because you forced them there, but because they chose to move toward you. And movement is always a sign of imbalance. The one who moves is seeking, the one who remains still is being sought. This is why stillness is one of the most underestimated forms of power. In a world obsessed with action, with constant response, with immediate feedback, the person who can remain composed, who can delay, who can choose not to react, becomes an anomaly. And anomalies attract attention. But more importantly, They disrupt the expected flow of interaction. Because most people are trained, almost unconsciously, to expect reciprocity. If they give attention, they expect attention back. If they show interest, they expect interest in return. If they open up, they expect vulnerability in response. And when that reciprocity is interrupted, it creates imbalance. Imbalance creates tension. Tension creates focus. And focus is the gateway to influence. Machiavelli would have seen this not as manipulation, but as understanding the natural mechanics of human behavior. People are not rational in the way they believe they are. They are guided by emotional currents, by subconscious drives, by the need to resolve discomfort and maintain a sense of control. But when you subtly remove that control, when you introduce unpredictability and stretch tension, they begin to reveal the very things they are trying to hide. And this is where the strategist must remain disciplined, because once you begin to see these patterns, there is a temptation to exploit them aggressively, to push harder, to accelerate the process. That is a mistake, because the power of this move lies in its subtlety. It is not about overwhelming the other person. It is about guiding them without their awareness. If you push too hard, the illusion breaks. They become conscious of the dynamic. And once awareness enters the equation, resistance follows, so you move carefully. You allow them to feel as though they are still in control, even as you shape the direction of the interaction. You give them enough comfort to stay engaged, enough uncertainty to remain invested, and enough space to reveal themselves. It is a delicate balance, but once mastered, it becomes second nature, and this is where the real transformation begins. Because at this point, you are no longer just using the move in isolated interactions. You begin to see how it applies everywhere. In conversations, in negotiations, in relationships, in competition. Everywhere humans interact, the same patterns emerge. The same need for certainty, the same discomfort with tension, the same instinct to resolve uncertainty as quickly as possible. And everywhere the same opportunity exists to step back, to observe, to break the pattern, to introduce uncertainty, to let tension build, to extract information, to guide the outcome. This is not something that can be faked. It requires awareness, patience, and control, because the hardest part of this strategy is not understanding it. It is resisting the urge to act like everyone else, to respond immediately, to explain yourself, to seek clarity, to close the loop. These impulses are deeply ingrained. They feel natural, they feel necessary, but they are also what make most people predictable, and predictability is the foundation of being outplayed. The moment someone can predict your behavior, they can prepare for it, they can counter it, they can manipulate it. But when your behavior exists just outside their expectations, when your responses are slightly delayed, slightly varied, slightly misaligned with the pattern they are trying to establish, they lose that ability. They cannot prepare for you, they cannot fully understand you, and in that gap you gain the advantage. This is the essence of strategic dominance, not force, not aggression, not overt control, but quiet, calculated influence, the kind that operates beneath awareness, the kind that shapes outcomes before they are even recognized as outcomes. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all is how simple it is. There is no complex formula, no elaborate system. Just a shift in how you engage, a refusal to be predictable, a willingness to let tension exist, a discipline to observe instead of react. And once you begin to apply this consistently, something changes, not just in how others respond to you, but in how you see the world. You begin to notice the invisible exchanges happening in every interaction, the subtle shifts in power, the unspoken negotiations, the silent signals. You see how people give away control without realizing it, how they rush to fill silence, how they reveal their intentions, how they seek validation. And you realize this is why the move works on 99% of the population. Because 99% of people are not playing consciously, they are following patterns, reacting to impulses, seeking comfort, avoiding tension, and in doing so they become predictable. And predictable people can be outmaneuvered. Not through force, but through understanding, through patience, through precision. The game at its core is not about overpowering others. It is about positioning yourself where their own behavior leads them into your design, where their need for certainty becomes your leverage, where their discomfort becomes your advantage, where their actions reveal everything you need to know. And once you reach this level, you begin to understand something that changes the way you move forever. You are no longer part of the game, you are designing it, and the moment you begin to design the game, you stop reacting to reality and start shaping it. And once you begin to shape reality instead of reacting to it, something inside you changes in a way that is almost irreversible. It is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is quiet, cold, and deeply unsettling, because you start to realize how much of the world is not fixed, not solid, not absolute, but fluid, reactive, and disturbingly easy to influence once you understand the mechanisms beneath it. At first, it feels like an advantage, a subtle edge, a way to move more effectively through conversations, negotiations, relationships. But then it deepens, it becomes a lens. And through that lens, you begin to see people not just as individuals, but as systems of behavior, patterns looping, repeating, revealing themselves in ways they are completely unaware of. You start to see the insecurity hidden behind confidence, the desperation disguised as indifference, the need for validation masked as independence. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is where the philosophy of Machiavelli stops being theory and becomes something far more dangerous, something practical. Because now every interaction becomes layered. There is what is being said, and there is what is actually happening. There is the surface, and there is the game beneath the surface, and most people never look beneath. They live their entire lives responding to appearances, to words, to emotions that are presented directly to them. They believe what they are shown, they trust what they hear, they assume that what is visible is what is real. But you have stepped behind the curtain, and behind that curtain you see the machinery, the gears turning, the silent exchanges of power that dictate outcomes long before those outcomes ever materialize. You see how easily perception can be shaped, how quickly attention can be redirected, how subtly influence can be applied without ever appearing to influence at all. And that realization is intoxicating, because it means control is not something that needs to be seized forcefully. It can be constructed quietly, piece by piece, moment by moment, decision by decision, but this is also where the true test begins. Because knowledge without discipline is chaos, and power without restraint is self-destruction, many who begin to understand these principles fall into the same trap. They become reactive again, but this time with intention. They try to manipulate too obviously. They push too hard. They rush the process, and in doing so, they expose themselves. They reveal the very thing they are trying to conceal. Because the paradox of this strategy is simple: the more you try to control everything, the less control you actually have. True control is subtle, it is patient, it is almost invisible, it does not announce itself, it does not demand recognition. It operates beneath awareness. Machiavelli understood that the most effective rulers were not the ones who constantly displayed power, but the ones who created systems where power sustained itself, where people behaved in ways that reinforced the ruler's position without needing to be forced. And this is where your understanding must evolve. Because the move you have learned, this simple shift in behavior, is not just a tactic, it is a foundation. A foundation for something much larger. You begin to realize that every environment you enter has its own structure, its own invisible rules, its own patterns of behavior that people unconsciously follow. And instead of conforming to those patterns, you begin to map them. You observe who seeks validation, who avoids conflict, who reacts emotionally, who needs control, who fears uncertainty. And as you map these patterns, you begin to position yourself in a way that interacts with them strategically. You do not challenge directly, you do not confront unnecessarily, you adjust slightly, precisely, until the environment begins to respond to you differently. Until people begin to treat you with a kind of caution they cannot explain, until interactions begin to unfold in your favor without you having to force them. This is where the game transcends individual moves and becomes something closer to mastery, because now you are not just breaking patterns. You are creating them. You are setting the rhythm of interactions. You are establishing expectations, only to reshape them when it benefits you. You are no longer reacting to the flow. You are the one controlling the current. And yet the most powerful part of all of this is not what others see. It is what you choose not to reveal, because restraint becomes your greatest weapon. You learn to hold back information, to delay reactions, to keep certain thoughts unspoken, not out of fear but out of strategy. Because every piece of information you reveal, every emotion you display, every reaction you give, becomes something that can be used to predict you. Unprediction is the enemy of power, so you become selective, deliberate, measured, not coldly but controlled, not distant but intentional, and this balance creates something rare, a presence that is felt more than it is understood, a presence that draws attention without demanding it, a presence that others instinctively try to figure out but never fully can. And in that space, you gain something most people spend their entire lives chasing without ever finding: influence. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, undeniable kind, the kind that shapes decisions, that alters behavior, that shifts outcomes without ever appearing to do so. And this is where the final realization begins to settle in. The game was never about outsmarting people in the obvious sense. It was never about proving intelligence or dominance or superiority. It was about understanding the rules that everyone else is unconsciously following, and choosing not to be bound by them. It was about stepping outside the predictable loop of reaction and becoming the one who sets the conditions others react to. It was about recognizing that most people are not thinking strategically, they are responding emotionally. And once you see that, once you truly understand it, you realize how much of the world is shaped by those who are simply willing to pause when others rush, to observe when others react, to remain silent when others reveal. This is the divide, the invisible line between those who are controlled by the game and those who control it. And crossing that line is not about learning more, it is about becoming different. It is about letting go of the need to be understood immediately, the need to respond instantly, the need to resolve every tension, the need to reveal every thought. Because those needs are what keep people predictable, and predictability is what keeps them powerless. So the question is no longer whether this move works. You already know it does. The question is whether you have the discipline to use it. Whether you can resist the pull of your own impulses, whether you can remain composed when silence feels uncomfortable, whether you can hold back when everything inside you wants to act. Because this is not just a strategy. It is a transformation, a shift in how you think, how you observe, how you move through the world, and once you embrace it fully, there is no going back to the way you used to see things. You will notice every predictable reaction, every unnecessary explanation, every moment where someone gives away control without realizing it. And you will understand that the difference between those who lead and those who follow is not strength, not intelligence, not luck, but awareness. Cold, precise, disciplined awareness. So now you stand at a threshold. You can return to the comfort of reaction, to the familiar patterns, to the predictable loop that governs most people's lives. Or you can step forward into a space where every move is intentional, where every silence has meaning, where every interaction becomes an opportunity to shape the outcome before it even begins. But understand this clearly, there is a cost, because once you begin to see the game, you also begin to see how often it is being played on you. You begin to recognize the subtle manipulations, the hidden incentives, the quiet power plays happening all around you. And you can no longer pretend they are not there. You can no longer be passive. You can no longer be unaware. So decide, not later, not when it is convenient, now. Will you continue to be predictable, reacting, revealing, surrendering control without even realizing it? Or will you step into the role of the strategist, the observer, the one who shapes instead of follows? Because the truth is brutally simple, the world does not reward those who merely participate in the game. It rewards those who understand it, So if you are ready to step beyond instinct, beyond reaction, beyond the unconscious patterns that bind the majority, then stop rushing. Stop revealing, stop playing at the surface, start observing, start positioning, start controlling the rhythm of every interaction you enter. And once you do, you will realize that the move was never just a move. It was the beginning of your transformation. And from this moment forward, every silence you choose, every pattern you break, every tension you allow to exist will either pull you back into the predictable world of the many or elevate you into the quiet, calculated power of the few. Choose carefully, and once you choose, do not hesitate again.